Sometimes the path to your greatest growth begins when you trust God enough to step into the unknown, leaving behind the familiar and embracing the new season He has planned for you. Have you ever felt like life is pulling you into a new season, one that feels uncertain, unfamiliar, or even uncomfortable? Maybe you're standing at the threshold of change, and you're unsure of what lies ahead. It's in these moments of transition that God is often doing something deeper in our lives than we can even begin to understand. In today's message, we're going to explore how God is leading you into a new season of life and why it's essential to trust His plans, even when they don't make sense. From the journey of faith that Abraham and Moses walked to the life of Jesus, we'll see how every shift, every change, and every new season is part of a greater purpose. You are not alone on this journey. God is guiding you with eternal wisdom, and He is revealing more of His character in ways that will transform you forever. So stick with me until the end, because by the time we're through, you'll have a fresh understanding of how to walk through every season of life with trust, courage, and a heart full of faith. Let's dive in together. There is a quiet rhythm stitched into the fabric of creation, a divine tempo that moves through the turning of the earth and the unfolding of our lives. We watch the trees turn gold and let go of their leaves, the frost creep gently across the fields, the thaw that brings green back to the sleeping ground. We are familiar with these seasons in nature, and we accept them. Winter must come before spring, and the flowers only bloom after the cold has passed. Yet when it comes to the seasons of our own lives, we often resist what we cannot understand, question what we cannot control, and fear what we cannot see. But what if the seasons we face are not random? What if they are crafted, designed, purposeful, ordained by a God who knows the end from the beginning? God is not a bystander in the timeline of your life. He is not watching your story unfold in surprise, nor is He reacting to events as though caught off guard. He is the author. Every chapter is His design. Every season, even the ones that bruise and bewilder us, carries His fingerprint. It is tempting to think of difficult seasons as detours, as interruptions to the path we were meant to take, but in truth, they may be the very route through which we are refined, redirected, and restored. The valleys are not void of meaning. The delays are not without divine intent. Nothing is wasted, not even the seasons we would never have chosen for ourselves. We live in a world that clings to predictability and control. We want schedules, guarantees, blueprints. But God does not lead us by spreadsheets or step-by-step itineraries. He leads us by faith. Faith does not flourish in the certainty of familiar surroundings. It grows best in the wilderness, where the old comforts are stripped away and we are left with nothing but trust. When you enter a new season, whether it feels like springtime renewal or a long winter of waiting, it is not because life has taken an arbitrary turn. It is because God in His wisdom has moved the story forward. There is a beauty in knowing that the season you are walking into has already passed through the hands of the Creator. Before you arrived at this moment, He was already here. He has seen every outcome. He has measured every step. And in His kindness, He has chosen this time, this change, this new direction, not to confuse you, but to conform you into the image of Christ. He is more concerned with your becoming than your convenience, more interested in your eternal character than your temporary comfort. When He brings a new season, it is not simply a change of scenery, it is an invitation to transformation. Consider the patriarchs, the prophets, the apostles. None of them walked lives of static safety. Abraham left everything familiar. Joseph was thrown into pits and prisons. Moses wandered the wilderness for 40 years. But through each shift in season, God was not absent. He was orchestrating a deeper purpose. The trials were not missteps. They were movements in a larger symphony. The same is true for you. That relationship that ended, that job that dissolved, that plan that fell apart. It may not have been failure. It may have been the turning of the page in a divine narrative far more intricate than you imagine. Often we only recognize the design of a season in hindsight, but faith invites us to trust even when the path ahead is shrouded in fog. Faith says, even if I don't understand this season, I will believe the one who holds it. For the God who formed galaxies and numbered the hairs on your head has not left the details of your life to chance. He weaves together endings and beginnings with precision. He allows pruning so that new fruit may grow. And he leads us season by season, not randomly, but with relentless love. Your life is not a series of disconnected moments or cosmic accidents. It is a divine tapestry, being threaded by hands that do not tremble. Trust that the season you are in, or the one just ahead, is not a mistake. It is part of something holy, part of something divine. There is something deeply human in our longing for the familiar. We find comfort in routine, security in what we know, a sense of identity in the places and patterns that have held us for years. And yet God, in his mysterious and often disruptive love, rarely calls his people to remain where they are. Again and again the scriptures show us a divine pattern, the calling out, the sending forth, the movement from the known into the unknown. Abraham, now in this mood, Abraham, forgive, said the Lord. The journey of faith is never static. It is marked by steps that lead away from safety and into something sacred. When God called Abram, he didn't give him a detailed plan, just a simple, unsettling command. Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. That's it. No map, no timeline, just trust. And so begins the journey, not just for Abram, but for every believer who dares to follow God into unfamiliar territory. There is no promise that the road will be easy, only that God will be present. But in that presence, there is power enough to sustain every step. Growth in the kingdom of God is not cultivated in the soil of comfort. The familiar, while warm and welcoming, often becomes the place where our faith plateaus. We stop listening, we stop depending, we grow content with a version of ourselves that God intends to transform. So he stirs us, sometimes gently, sometimes violently, but always purposefully. He uproots us, not to harm us, but to plant us deeper. He removes the crutches we've leaned on so that we might learn to walk by faith. Leaving the familiar is not God's punishment. It is often his preparation. There are moments in every believer's life where the Spirit whispers, it's time to go. That going may be physical, emotional, spiritual, or relational. It may mean stepping away from an old dream, releasing a long-held bitterness, walking into a calling you don't feel qualified for, or leaving a place where you once flourished but now feel empty. It's uncomfortable, it's disorienting. It might feel like loss, but it is precisely there, in that in-between space between the shore and the sea, where growth happens. It is in the risk of obedience that the roots of faith dig deeper. Israel could not possess the promised land without first leaving Egypt, but leaving was not easy. Even after miracles and deliverance, their hearts were tempted to return. At least in Egypt we had food, they cried. There is a strange temptation to idolize captivity when freedom feels uncertain. But God is not interested in partial deliverance. He does not call you out to abandon you halfway. The wilderness is not the end. It's the proving ground, and only those willing to leave the past behind can inherit the fullness of what God has ahead. Jesus himself modeled this rhythm of departure. He left heaven to dwell among us. He left crowds to seek solitude with the Father. He left the safety of Nazareth to walk the path that led to the cross, and he calls his disciples to do the same. Take up your cross and follow me. The cross is not carried in comfortable places. It leads away from convenience. It leads away from control. But it always leads toward resurrection. There can be no empty tomb without the garden of surrender, no new life without letting go of the old. The familiar feels like home, but sometimes it becomes a cage. God sees the potential in you that you cannot see yourself. He knows what must be shaken loose, what must be pried from your hands, so that you can grow into the image of his Son. It is never about loss for the sake of loss. It is about pruning for the sake of fruit. And when you trust him enough to step out, to let go, to move forward even when your knees shake, you begin to realize that his plans are far more beautiful than your comfort zones. The truth is, spiritual growth is rarely birthed in stability. It is forged in the fires of transition, in the discomfort of unfamiliar paths. You will never know how deeply God can be trusted until he leads you where you cannot rely on your own strength. And when you get to the other side of obedience, when you look back, you won't miss what you left behind. You'll see it for what it was, the launching ground for something greater. There are moments in life when God calls us to follow him into the unknown, to step away from the safety of the maps we've drawn for ourselves and place our trust fully in his guidance. This act of trust is not a passive one. It is not a blind following without purpose or awareness. It is a decision to relinquish control, to release our need for certainty and to walk by faith, even when the path ahead is obscured. Trust in this sense is not just about believing that God can guide us, but about surrendering our tightly held notions of how we want the journey to unfold. Our human tendency is to cling to the illusion of control. We want to know what the next step is. We want to prepare for every eventuality. We want a roadmap that will take us from point A to point B without detours, without setbacks, without unknowns. Yet, God does not work this way. He does not give us the entire blueprint at once, because he desires not just our obedience, but our hearts. He longs for us to trust in his goodness, his wisdom, and his timing, even when we cannot see the destination. We are called to walk by faith, not by sight, releasing the map that promises security and instead embracing the uncertainty that calls us into deeper relationship with him. In the scriptures, we see numerous examples of people who had to let go of their maps to trust God fully. Abraham, the father of faith, was called to leave his homeland with nothing more than the promise of a future that was still unseen. God told him, "Go to the land I will show you." Notice the lack of detail. God didn't give him a map, nor did he provide a timetable. He simply called Abraham to follow, one step at a time, into the unknown. This was not an easy calling. It required Abraham to relinquish his own plans, his own understanding of what a secure future looked like, and to place his trust entirely in the God who was leading him. Similarly, Moses, when called to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, didn't have a clear road ahead. The journey from slavery to freedom was anything but straightforward. There were countless obstacles: Red Seas, desert wilderness, food shortages, rebellious hearts. The map Moses had in mind did not exist. Yet Moses chose to follow God's lead, even when he had no clear direction. His trust was not in the plan, but in the one who held the plan. When we trust God, we are not trusting in a set of instructions. We are trusting in his presence and his faithfulness, even when the steps are unclear. Jesus, too, exemplified this radical trust when he walked this earth. In his own ministry, he often moved in ways that defied human expectations. He did not follow a predictable path, nor did he rely on a clear plan for every moment. He walked with the Father, listening to his voice, moving when prompted, staying when directed, and trusting that his Father knew what was best, even when it didn't make sense. Jesus' ministry was not mapped out ahead of time. It was marked by a constant submission to the will of his Father. In our own lives, letting go of the map can feel terrifying. We are asked to trust in God's timing, in his methods, and in his wisdom. It means giving up the illusion of control and acknowledging that we don't always know what is best for us. But it is precisely in this surrender that God meets us. Trust is not about understanding every detail. It is about knowing that he who calls us is faithful. He sees the path that we cannot see. His vision is not limited by time or circumstance. He is not surprised by the twists and turns that often take us off guard. What looks like a detour to us is part of his perfect plan. Faith is not about being in control. It is about being in relationship with the one who is, and this relationship is founded on trust. We trust not just because of what God does for us, but because of who he is. His character is trustworthy. His love is constant. His plans are good, even when they take us in directions we didn't anticipate. When we let go of the map, we stop relying on our own understanding and we start relying on his. We choose to follow his lead, even when it feels like we're walking in the dark. God doesn't always show us the full picture because he desires our hearts. If he gave us the map, we might be more inclined to follow the route rather than the one who is leading us. Trusting God is not about understanding the journey from start to finish. It is about knowing that he is with us every step of the way. And with that assurance, we are free to let go of the map and follow him into the unknown, with full confidence that his ways are higher than ours and his plans are always for our good. We are creatures of time, bound by the limits of our days and seasons, and often our perspective on life is shaped by what we can see, touch, and experience in the present moment. We live with immediate needs, urgent desires, and a sense of urgency that pushes us towards seeking the quickest solutions, the most comfortable outcomes, and the most convenient paths. But God does not operate within the confines of time the way we do. His view of our lives is not limited to the here and now, but rather is grounded in an eternal wisdom that stretches far beyond the immediate circumstances we face. His plans are not shaped by what feels good in the moment. They are guided by a deep understanding of the eternal good he is working toward in our lives. When we find ourselves in seasons of waiting, uncertainty, or struggle, we may feel as though God's timing is slow, or that his plans don't align with what we think we need or want in the moment. We look at our present struggles, be it financial hardship, relationship issues, health concerns, or emotional burdens, and we wonder why God isn't acting quickly to resolve them. But what we often fail to grasp in those moments is that God's ultimate purpose is not to make our lives immediately comfortable or free from pain. His purpose is to form us, to shape our character, to refine our faith, and to prepare us for the eternal glory that far outweighs the temporary difficulties we may face. God's plans are rooted in eternal wisdom, and that wisdom sees beyond our present desires and knows what is truly best for us in the long run. God's understanding of what is best for us is not confined to what we can comprehend in the short term. His wisdom reaches into the depths of our lives, into the depths of our souls, and sees things that we cannot even begin to imagine. He knows the struggles we will face, the lessons we need to learn, and the areas where we need to grow. He understands how the pain we feel today can become the soil in which a deeper trust in him is cultivated tomorrow. And he knows how the joys and triumphs we experience now are preparing us for even greater joy and triumph in eternity. The temporal comforts we seek may be fleeting, but the eternal purposes of God are unshakable, unchanging, and always leading us to something far greater than we can see at the moment. The story of Joseph in the Old Testament is one of the most profound examples of this. Joseph's journey was marked by betrayal, suffering, and years of waiting. His brothers sold him into slavery, he was falsely accused, and he languished in prison for years, seemingly forgotten by both man and God. In the middle of all his suffering, Joseph could have questioned God's plans, believing that his present circumstances were a clear indication of God's abandonment. Yet Joseph was able to look beyond his immediate suffering and recognize that God was working in ways he couldn't yet understand. As he reflected on his life later, Joseph acknowledged that it was not his brothers who sent him to Egypt, but God. God's plan for Joseph's life involved immense pain, but it was through that pain that God brought about something far greater, saving many lives, including the very ones who had betrayed him. Joseph's life teaches us that God's plans are often hidden beneath layers of hardship, and his wisdom sees beyond our current circumstances to an eternal good. Similarly, the Apostle Paul wrote in Romans that we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Paul knew firsthand that God's plans often lead through difficult and painful experiences, yet he also understood that those very experiences were working to shape him into the person God had called him to be, and were part of a far larger plan that was rooted in eternity. Paul's life was not about comfort or convenience. It was about fulfilling God's eternal purpose, a purpose that was often realized through his suffering and trials. For Paul, the inconvenience of the present was always weighed against the eternal glory of God's plan for his life. When we embrace this perspective, it changes the way we view our struggles and challenges. We begin to see them not as interruptions to our lives, but as integral parts of the process that God is using to refine us. We may not understand why certain things are happening or why God's plans seem so different from our own, but we can trust that his wisdom is eternal, that he sees the beginning from the end, and that his purposes will ultimately lead us to a place of greater joy, greater fulfillment, and greater closeness to him. The plans God has for us are not contingent on our present comfort. They are rooted in his eternal wisdom, and they are always for our ultimate good. This perspective invites us to rest in the knowledge that God's timing is perfect, even when it doesn't align with our own sense of urgency. We can trust that he is not only working in our present circumstances, but is also preparing us for the eternal future he has promised. His plans are not shaped by the convenience of the moment, but by his perfect wisdom, which is always working toward an end that will bring him glory and us everlasting joy. God is always revealing himself to us, and each season of life serves as a canvas for his ever-deepening revelation. We often approach life with expectations based on what we have already known or experienced, but God's ways are far beyond our understanding, and his character is vast, unsearchable, and inexhaustible. Every season, every change, every transition is an opportunity to encounter a new facet of who God is, and to see his faithfulness in a deeper, more intimate way. The seasons of our lives are not just about the changes we face. They are about the invitation to see God more clearly, to know him more fully, and to understand his purposes for us in ways we could never have imagined before. When we walk through different seasons, we often focus on the challenges and the uncertainties, the discomfort of the unknown, or the waiting that feels endless. We may long for things to return to what they once were, or desire a future that looks familiar and safe. But God, in his wisdom, is not concerned with our desire for comfort. He is concerned with our transformation, and transformation comes through the unfolding of his character in our lives. Every new season, no matter how difficult or unexpected, is a fresh opportunity to encounter God in ways we may have never experienced before. Consider the Israelites as they journeyed through the wilderness. They had been delivered from Egypt, but they had yet to fully grasp the nature of the God who had rescued them. In the desert, God revealed himself in ways that were both mighty and intimate. He provided manna from heaven, quenching their hunger. He gave them water from a rock, meeting their thirst. He led them with a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. In the wilderness, they encountered God not just as their deliverer, but as their provider, sustainer, and guide. In the difficult and uncomfortable wilderness, they learned to depend on him in ways they never would have in the security of Egypt. That season revealed the faithfulness of God in new and powerful ways, and it deepened their understanding of his character. When we face seasons of struggle or waiting, we often cry out for relief, for the pain to end, for the storm to pass. But God is not merely interested in rescuing us from our circumstances. He is interested in revealing himself to us in the midst of them. Just as the Israelites learned about God's provision and presence in the wilderness, we too learn about God's love and faithfulness in the seasons where we feel lost or uncertain. In the midst of our trials, we encounter God as our comforter, our strength, our peace. Each season, whether it brings joy or sorrow, is an invitation to know him more deeply and to experience his presence in ways we would not in times of ease. The Apostle Paul, writing to the Philippians, said, "I want to know Christ, yes, to know the power of his resurrection and participation in his sufferings, becoming like him in his death." Paul understood that the full revelation of Christ could not be grasped apart from experiencing both his power and his suffering. Just as Christ's life was marked by both glory and suffering, so too is our journey of faith. In times of abundance, we experience God's goodness and generosity. In times of loss, we come to know his sustaining grace and mercy. Each new season is a revelation of a different aspect of who he is. Jesus himself experienced the full range of human emotions and conditions. He wept at the tomb of Lazarus, showing us God's compassion in our grief. He endured the cross, showing us the depths of God's love and sacrifice. He was raised to life, demonstrating God's power to bring life from death. Every season of Jesus' earthly life revealed a different part of God's character: his love, his justice, his mercy, and his power. We are invited to walk through our seasons of life with the same expectation that through each one we will encounter a new revelation of who God is. Even in seasons of silence, when God seems distant or unresponsive, he is revealing himself in ways we cannot immediately comprehend. Silence does not mean absence. Just as a teacher's silence allows the student to discover answers on their own, so too does God's silence often teach us to lean into him, to trust in his timing, and to understand that his presence does not always come in loud or immediate ways. In seasons of silence, we learn that God is present, even in the absence of obvious signs. We learn to trust in his hidden faithfulness, knowing that he is still working, even when we cannot see it. In every season, God's invitation is the same: to know him more deeply, whether in times of joy or sorrow, abundance or lack, certainty or uncertainty. We are invited to discover a new revelation of God's character. It is in these moments of transition and change that we are shaped and transformed into the likeness of Christ, and it is in these moments that God's presence becomes more real, more precious, and more life-changing than ever before. Every season is a chance to encounter the living God, and as we walk through the changing seasons of life, we are drawn ever closer to the heart of the One who holds all things in his hands. As we reflect on the journey God is leading us through, we are reminded that every season, every transition, is part of his divine plan to shape us into the image of his Son. In each new chapter of life, God calls us to trust him more deeply, to leave behind the familiar, to let go of our own control, and to rest in His eternal wisdom. These seasons may challenge us, stretch us, and sometimes even break us, but in each moment God is revealing more of His character to us, His love, His faithfulness, His provision, and His power. We are not walking this path alone. The God who calls us is the God who leads us, and He is faithful to guide us through every season of life, no matter how uncertain or difficult it may seem. As we trust in His plans, knowing that they are rooted in eternal wisdom, we can have confidence that every season of life is working together for our good and His glory. So, as you move forward into whatever new season God is leading you to, remember that He is with you every step of the way. Trust His plans, let go of the map, embrace the journey, and know that each season is an opportunity to encounter the deeper, unchanging character of God. Thank you for listening today. May you be encouraged and strengthened in your faith as you walk in the trust and confidence that God is always leading you to something greater. May you experience His presence more intimately in each season of your life. God bless you all.